Hi, it is Fung Skovgaard. I'm from GlobalNet 21, and we are an organization who provide a platform to discuss issues and social problems in the century of 21st. The network is about 20,000 people today. It has existed in the last 10 years, but the last couple of years, we have got global members. That's where we started to do webinar. And the good news is that because we run webinar, we also have international speakers. And with £15 a year, you can have access to the database of all our webinars and face-to-face meeting. We have about 75 meetings a year. And we have our webinars on Facebook or YouTube. You are very welcome to join. If you can go into GlobalNet 21 website, you can join. Tonight we are talking about 3E, which I would like to hand it over to Wayne, who would explain what 3E is about. But the main theme for tonight is about young people, how to get them in, to introduce them to the working environment or working phase of their life. So welcome, Wayne, and I would hand it over to you to talk about what 3E is about.
Thank you. Just a quick word about myself. The reason Fong invited me to talk to you this evening is that I've been involved for the last 20 years in empowering young people to take a bit more control of their lives and to become involved in social issues. In doing so, I've noticed there's a strong entrepreneurial spirit amongst young people that flies in the face of some of the common media stories. So I started to work on a project that brought together those strands, which came under the heading of 3Es, looking at how that enthusiasm, not intending to create a fourth E, for entrepreneurial outlooks related to employability, how it encouraged them to view their education in a different way, and most importantly, looked at how they could become engaged. It came out of the fact that although I'm seeing a lot of young people wanting to get involved, there's all this strange idea. There seems to be this emphasis on the fact that we have this skills gap, and it's always about the hard skills. So we tend to have this very schooly approach to things that says, okay, there's the skills gap, create the courses, the young people will follow because they need the work. But I don't know whether you've ever noticed that when you're discussing this, you often get responses, particularly from adults, around how do we get these buggers to work? They don't seem to want to work back in our day. But it's not just work. Do they have the right attitude when they get here? They don't have the right attitudes. They don't seem to have the right motivations. They don't seem to grab those loads of opportunities that are out there. But then when you start talking to young people, as I have been doing for the last 5 years, I quite often find that they don't actually believe they're allowed to do that. They're not allowed to take up those opportunities. There seems to be a slightly different emphasis. It's not simply, I want to be a bricklayer. It's, I want to be a bricklayer that doesn't harm the environment. And then there's that, well, what's the point? This constant idea that technology is actually taking their jobs away from them. There's no point in getting involved because machines are going to do it. And I think the one thing that got me through the last 15 years, gets me every time, is where I get a phrase around the thought that I thought that was just for posh kids. There seems to be a disempowerment in getting involved that young people express quite eloquently if you bother listening to. So that made me think, well, actually, we're not just talking about the hard skills gap. What I tend to find as I'm trying to get young people involved is there's a soft skills gap. Let's put it simply. They don't smile when they meet somebody because of nervousness. Those sort of soft skills that we probably as adults start doing without thinking, a shake of a hand, look somebody in the eye. And because of that soft skill gap, there's also an engagement gap. It's fascinating to me that when you start talking about, well, what do you want to do? Young people, we tend to frame the discussion, not in the case of, well, how do you want to get involved? Or do you realize that's going to be relevant to? It tends to be slightly more didactic than that, telling them how they should be engaged, how they should engage, which then leads to a motivation gap, because if you're being told, you tend not to get involved. And because of the lack of engagement, because of the lack of motivation, you end up with the education gap. So I was getting, right, we've got all these gaps. How do we bridge them? I started thinking about, well, how do you engage young people? Now, people that are not normally engaged, where have I seen them come from? And I started initially that engagement with citizen science. I spent 12 years creating projects where young people could actively contribute their observations to scientific research. It was tremendously popular across the UK, but it wasn't enough. It was okay, that was okay because you were getting something, you did something, you made an observation, you sent it, but that was it. That was the limit of your involvement. Now, for some, that's enough. But as they became more engaged, we got to the point where people wanted to take that passive involvement into something more active. So I started looking at non-formal education using sustainable development goals, originally Agenda 21, and sort of saying, okay, you create an interest by getting this observation or involvement, but you need a framework then that allows young people to take it into a point of action. Taking it into the point of action led us to creating a methodology that encouraged young people as part of the United Nations Environment Programme Youth Award to say, right, okay, there's your interest, you've identified the problem, you've identified something you could do. Here's a framework that allows you to take that on your own into something that is active. What amazed me about those examples was the number of times young people came back setting up a small business, setting up a small community project that meant they had to develop the skills within a lot of those skills gaps. From that, we thought, well, from action, you start moving into policy. And we started thinking, well, okay, you've gone from a passive observation into a framework. There, you can turn it into action. From action, you actually start saying, this is how you can deliver it. And you're finding more and more young people getting involved, but you're still trying to overcome that posh kids thing. So we started working on consultations to do with policy, actively giving young people a voice. And as we did that, we found that when we started listening and using some of the methods I'm going to go on to talk about, we found their confidence increasing, their engagement increasing, their involvement increasing, to the extent that I'm now being contacted by young people saying they've carried on into a career or they've started a business of their own simply through that involvement and confidence. We use their ideas as a focus for developing skills and attitudes that became relevant to future employment. And I've got to say, though, a lot of this wasn't just listening and letting them do. A lot of this was about giving a harsh reality check, putting in real expectations, and allowing them to deal with the shock that even as adults don't actually get it right all the time or know what we're doing. So when I started trying to draw all these things together, we began a pilot a year and a half ago in a small Cambridgeshire parish. It started by using the Sustainable Development Goals with young people to think about possible project ideas, look at the opportunities that they had to act and focus for developing skills. It was a protracted process as we learned our lessons on the way, but the young people were actively involved. And as they became more involved, they reduced their disengagement. They began to see a lot of relevance. When they were having to do research on any of their project ideas, all of a sudden, all that spreadsheet math stuff was important when they had to start costing things out for grant applications. And the biggest shock they had is that if they didn't deliver, they were dismissed from the project. The same thing that we probably have in part of our contract. But in doing that, they could begin to develop the skills and the ability to talk and present to things like parish councils and local employers and say to them, well, look, we're trying to develop our own project. This is our initiative. This is what we're trying to do. How can we involve yourselves? And all of a sudden there was an intergenerational dialogue developing. And again, oh, all of this stuff we're learning at school, yeah, it's relevant. It helps you put the presentation together. Oh, all of this stuff that adults are doing, they haven't got all the answers either. No, but you can now be part of the debate, but this is how you get involved. These are the skills that you need. To achieve that, we started by examining what other methods of participation were being used. It was quite interesting that although you might have the impression that young people are bombarded with opportunities, they seem to know very little about who they were and where they were and what they were. So we started building that database up for them and saying, okay, guys, come on, this is how you can do it. And then obtaining their ideas and encouraging them to use those opportunities to develop entrepreneurial skills. We've used that not just in terms of, okay, there's the UN Environment Plastic Action thing that's out there at the moment. Let's work out what your ideas are for participation. That's fine, that's stage one. An example of stage two, where you get them to develop their entrepreneurial skills, we've worked with a small community in Wales looking at the development of community forestry. And through that, young people went from being viewed as somebody that hung about in forests and perhaps did a bit of damage to realizing that they wanted to work in forestry, but they have no access to the basic training. So they could work with the adults in the local community, and they started to get that training. So they were working to develop and encourage the development of skills. To do that, we also found out that stop telling them how to develop something for sustainable development goals or green economy. Working on projects like the Welsh one, community-based ones around the world, we found that most young people have got an idea. You will find there are product champions, if you like, project champions. And as we found with our pilot, as we found with each of the ideas I'm talking about here, you find a core of 2 or 3 individuals, and they bring the rest along, creating community-based projects. They create the dialogue. They act as local leaders, and young people, local communities and authorities start coming together. It was interesting that in all of these, parents who are involved in industry, jobs or whatever, started to become part of the group. Young people started engaging with them and realizing that actually mom and dad can be quite cool. They can actually help. For example, when we worked with Hull City Council creating an area action plan, young people were looking at helping design housing strategies that they will, for estates and so on, that they will be moving into. Every time it turned out that there were parents that could help them with their presentation to the City Council. Every time there were things that they could learn from each other and their parents. So once you have that dialogue with business and participants, you can create the pathways, and all of a sudden, training, education becomes relevant. The high school that we worked with in Hull, it was amazing to see the young people start to become engaged and realize, hey, wait a minute, we can use some of this stuff that we're learning and we can adapt and develop it. It gives us the ground rock for us to do this cool stuff. So as an example of what I'm talking about, the pilot program that we set up in Orwell in Cambridgeshire was a plastic-free tuck shop. It's still a work in progress as the young people involved develop their own skills. So they began to work with partners to identify people in local communities. So we discussed things with county, district, parish councils, the Royal Society of Arts in Cambridgeshire, and we've even discussed it with IUCN. Okay, so we did this so that we could identify the young people and then establish a baseline of what their perceptions of the projects they can do. this takes time. The reason for working with local communities and so on is to make sure that we knew what the opportunities were, what they could be doing, and how it could relate to everything else that was going on. As we were doing that, they began to identify down with several project ideas they wanted to do. They picked up on the fact they wanted healthier food in their tuck shop for their local youth club. But it was a case of starting where young people were at and challenging any misconceptions about what is relevant, what is realistic. So they could create with us a basic training and project plan. All of it coming from them writing something, finding out how it was wrong, and then redeveloping it, mentoring them through a process of testing a product, costing projects, researching their ideas, making sure that they were being pushed to think and develop their own ideas. What I loved about this is that not only were they creating the dialogue with local people, not only were they going, right, okay, our first few project ideas don't work. Even though they didn't work, it wasn't a case of, oh, well, that's rubbish, let's reinvent it. So we carried on reinventing, they carried on researching, and finally focused in on the fact that they wanted this plastic-free tuck shop, and then discovered that it couldn't be plastic-free because of what they were doing. They were still reliant on it, so they started reducing. In doing that, they've actually started to produce their own education and training materials. And they want, going right the way back to the beginning where I said that we were working currently with UN on plastic-free, they inspired us to look at how we can actually create that into some form of award program or a challenge locally into creating a green business. This is not designed to be yet another. It was how the young people drew everything together so it all complemented. From that successful program, I'm saying successful with a slight smile on my face because it was successful in the fact they had to learn to overcome their problems. They had to overcome their difficulties. We're now working with people to extend the pilot into communities and schools. And currently we're looking with the Royal Society of Arts and seeing how we can move it into 300 communities in September. It's allowing us to establish the tools to create a baseline of young people's perceptions of education and training, and using the materials that the young people in the pilot have written and other projects, consultations to say, okay, guys, here's a framework of sustainable development goals. What are the issues in your local community? Collate the information together. As we found with an innovators program that's been run in Illinois along the same lines, using the same techniques, create the collaborations and see how you can create your projects that lead to other forms of employability. What I am intrigued by are not so much the hard skills, but it's also the soft skills and the engagement skills. Where you find young people are being given the opportunity for everything to be brought together instead of being bombarded, where you are enabling them to work within a framework, so it's not a blank sheet of paper that you're giving them, but it's not, you're going to do it this way, you just give them that. Their definition of skills development doesn't always run the course that perhaps you might think it does. I was fascinated to see a young person deliberately looking at poetry in the Illinois example and looking at creating a poetry book and how that could be involved and seeing that as an employability project. I am fascinated by a couple of the young people that I'm working with on the pilot that are now actively looking at how they can become involved in gender politics, all of which coming out of engagement in employability and watching them develop their own ideas. It does become difficult, and I am actively exploring with several other people now how we can use the user experience design approach to evaluate all the elements of the program and other programs and use these outcomes that make employability programs such as ours relevant, but also reflect employers and employment requirements. to create a sort of green business challenge. The other thing that we're realizing is that we've got to, and we've got to do this perhaps online, is give ongoing peer support. The young people decided they wanted a green guild, but that might have had something to do with what they've been reading at the moment, to look at initial problems and continue that support as you bridge the gap into more formal education. In short, I think by taking a more action competent approach, starting with the young people, but giving them a realistic framework, not an entire blank sheet of paper, but a framework such as sustainable development goals that brings them in, that gives them a hook, that responds to the fact that, well, wait a minute, the world has got to change and your jobs will probably change with it, be part of the discussion. You can create an employability training program that is created by and for young people, starting with that issue that motivates them. I like the fact that it creates a local partnership with something like a parish council, so that businesses and local people can use it to help educate and train through practical real-life examples. The community-based project, communicating young people's involvement, creating intergenerational education, I think it is so powerful, but very difficult to do if you're looking at a parish level in the UK or a community council level. But here is a way of doing it that doesn't reinvent the wheel, that allows all the other initiatives to be brought together and complemented, and you can feed these young people that are not normally engaged into the relevant program. They get to choose. And what I liked about it was parents became cool. It's a role for employers as members of a community, not just a business, which is creating a different perception amongst young people. Okay, intergenerational, adults' perceptions of young people changes. They begin to realize, well, actually, they want to get involved. They want to create these projects. They want to be involved in local community. They want to do something that helps. But it's also creating a different perception amongst young people as they realize they're the ones, the 2 or 3 leaders that have to bring people together. They have to manage the situation. The 2 or 3 leaders that start the process and bring everyone else involved. So I think, to finish off, that if you are talking about those skills gaps and you're talking about employability and engagement and education, the key thing is to stop trying to do it entirely to young people. To go right the way back to the beginning for me, citizen science, where we used to tell young people, do this, and it was fine. A lot of the younger generation I talk to, and feeling very old as I say it, because I am, a lot of them have moved on. Their understanding, their development, their awareness, as ours was probably at their age, is a lot better about the world than ours. And this is an opportunity to engage them through their own interests, through their local community, and bringing in local employers to help make it more relevant.
Thank you very much, Wayne. It was great. And I would like to, I have some questions already. Joy Cowley-Smith asked a question from Facebook. She was saying that she gave a training today and she could see that young people today, they don't have soft skills. She said they don't have eye contact, they don't have soft skills, they don't have body skills or body language, and which is very important. And she suggested mentors should help them to work on it. So you mentioned about it before. Who had done that work to help people to gain soft skills, yourself or other people or themselves?
Okay, I think it's one of the most pleasurable sides I've seen to watch young people go from doing this, which I hope you can see on the camera.
No, I can't see. I just could see
They
your
were
hand.
just with their heads down,
to
looking you in the eye. Now, to answer your question, I think there are 2 elements to it. First of all, it was the patience required by the youth worker, community worker, or teacher that was working with them on the project that we'd identified. So in The example I'm thinking of, this was in Suffolk. It was with a school. The teacher was actively involved, and we went in and we mentored the teacher, actually. They created a local garden. The young people themselves started to be active and develop those soft skills because it was a project they wanted to do. It started to develop because when they had to present their project, we were offering the training and the mentoring and actually mirroring their behaviors back. But the most important thing for me was the fact that we treated them as adults right the way through. So these were 13 to 16-year-olds. And what got me is that nobody, prior to them getting actively involved in this sort of project, had actually explained to them that's what you need to do. And as soon as the light bulb went on, oh, right, okay. I think it was, I know you always said to model those soft skills. I actually find by mirroring what they're doing to me and then saying, is that okay? And then saying no, so right, okay, let's work on this. And getting other people that are working with them to do the same thing, it actually helps. But it is about giving, actually saying it to them, right, you want to present your project? You ain't gonna work like that. The reality of it is important. I'm not sure I've answered her question. Sorry.
I think that you answered the question. I'm just thinking about, you were saying about treating it as adult. Yes. So you, in saying that you are treating them as adult, what do you mean? You mirror their behavior.
Yeah. So when we're trying to say, right, okay, you may have to do a presentation to your local parish council or your school board. And okay, do it. Show me how you're going to do it. So I was working with a young person the other week, and they were remarkably competent at spreadsheets. They were remarkably competent until I said, right, you're now going to have to stand up and present this, because this is your project. When they stood up and did it, I stood up and mirrored everything that they'd done. So I said, does that look good? And they said, no. Then I said, right, okay, let's work out what it is that you should have done right. And we developed it from that point of view. Then the other youth worker on the project took that method away and did it with everyone else. That's the mirroring side. Treating them as adults was the shock they had when I said, well, actually, we've got a limited amount of time here. What you just did won't work. So that straightforward talking that you often find in your everyday working life was new. They hadn't been exposed to that way of talking. It wasn't done in an unfriendly way. It was done in a friendly way. And said, right, okay, we haven't got time here. You're on a deadline. You have to deliver. This is what it's like. When you enter the world of work, you're going to be doing that for a long time. By the way, if you want to set up a community project, you have to do this. So it is creating that framework of reality for them to work in. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It doesn't have to be nasty. It doesn't have to be bullying, but it can be realistic.
It explained, because I thought that treating them like adults, I thought about it differently, but it doesn't matter. You explained. Peter was talking about he likes your approach to have young people to get self-confidence, and it is very good to be able to value and develop a very good skills, not just academic. And he also said that to put it into the community context, it would help them to develop soft skills much faster.
If you're in a village setting or a small community setting, how young people will actually then encounter their parents' friends who are aware of what they're doing. And they start to value themselves. So Peter's quite right. It's fascinating to see how that value and that discussion, and because they've had to do the research element, they can talk with a little more authority. They don't have to be nervous. But I also think it's the value that a young person can develop in school if they're disengaged. I did some work with some looked after children a few years ago, adopting the same methodology, but this time they were exploring climate change, which led them into energy efficiency projects. And the young people that I was working with, they were a little bit to one side in the school community. They weren't quite accepted. But all of a sudden, because of what they were saying, what they were doing, they had a value. They became known as the climate group. They were the climate people. And again, I watched their confidence grow, because instead of them being other, they were exceptional. So yeah, it's nice to see that develop. But again, it comes down to good structure for your non-formal education.
Then I have another question here from Michelle. Let me read it up for you. Did the student feel as the adult? Did they feel as adult really understood the disjoint between aspiration for green business and reality? Which is the difference?
Greenwash thing, yes, yeah.
Do you want to take that one?
No, look, this is the one thing I get so energized by these projects. The United Nations Youth Award, 12 years of young people coming forward, not interested in greenwash, not interested in this thing that we know, oh, crap, we've got to worry about, does this connect with this and all that. No, I'll tell you what we're going to do. This is a good idea, we're going to do it. And it's going to be as sustainable and as green as we can possibly make it. It's this great thing about early teenage years, their enthusiasm, their desire to make something happen. And they cut through a lot of the debate we have. Then I meet them a few years later, and that is when they have become very aware of greenwash. They are very aware of the complications of it. But instead of viewing it as a, what do we do about it? All of a sudden, I'm seeing them go, right, I've done this about it. I've done this thing. I've started this project. I just like the motivation that comes from it.
I hope that it answers Michelle. Yes, she said their enthusiasm is so important. I can only agree.
It can be directed in, not directed in a didactic way, but if you're talking about creating an enthusiasm that they feel empowered, but they understand the realities of a local community project or setting up the project, so that when they're faced with these disjuncts, they don't view it as a hammer that's hitting them. They tend to view it as a, right, here's another problem that we need to try and solve. That just keeps me going every day.
I can see in your eyes. Patricia has another question. She likes the fact that you have looked into the US. Do you have any working relationship with them, and how, and give some examples if you have any?
Yeah, I had my eyes opened, actually. I have a very good colleague, Paul Ritter, who I met through the UNEP Youth Award. And he invited me over to Illinois to work in his high school, looking at local biodiversity. He was interested because I'd done quite a few wild gardens in the UK, and he was sort of saying, well, we haven't really done that. He said, I'm sure we have somewhere in the States, but we haven't. Do you want to come over and see what we can do? We did, and as we talked it through, he asked me to get involved in a couple of projects. First of all, we went to, I suppose they call them camps, where young people from not so privileged backgrounds were brought together, and we were collaborating with the Sun Foundation there in Illinois, creating programs that just engage them with their local environment. Those practical projects that they came up with, they then went back and took them into schools. That's evolved now into the Illinois Innovators Project, where I think it's the Millikan and the University of Illinois that are working with Paul, and they're drawing me in as and when they need me, creating the same sort of frameworks that encourage young people to develop small businesses or community projects around the Pontiac, Peoria area. The inspiration that you get from such real go-getter young people that are definitely trying to overcome some areas that perhaps we don't normally see on the TV when we're looking at the US from the UK. I am really encouraged by the way those young people are embracing, without using the terms that we use, they are embracing ideas of sustainable development. They're embracing ideas of local development and community and supporting of each other. But if, did you say it was Patricia? Patricia,
Yep.
if Fong can put you in touch, I can put you, and you want to know more, I can put you directly in touch with Paul, and you can get chapter and verse on the Innovations Project over there. And I'll also be able to share some of the frameworks we've developed.
Yes, I will try to get her in touch with you. She really likes what you are doing, and she would love to be in touch with this person you are talking about.
That's fine. Well, if you can facilitate that, I'm more than happy to do it.
Yep, I will. So Michelle has another question. Please elaborate on the UX design approach.
Ooh. Yeah, this is my latest toy. I think that's the best way of describing it. I've been doing some work with some technology projects where user experience, UX, user experience, is very much part of how you look at how the product, the innovation is accepted, used by the intended recipient. So there's, and this is really simplifying it, but looking at the time I'm going to have to really simplify it. Essentially what you do, you look at the different and research into the different personas of the people that might be using the product or project. Then from that you look at their experience and you map their experiences, and from that mapping you are then able to identify why are they participating, not participating, and how you might have to tweak what you're trying to do. So I like the fact that you can take an innovation, pilot it, test it, and then go, right, how are we going to make it go further? How are we going to make it so it engages with the various, I would say, stakeholder groups? Those guys say persona. And I said, right, this is actually a very valuable tool that we should be using if we want, but well, at several levels. For me, I thought this is a great way of actually making sustainable development goals real. Because if you go with something that are that vague and woolly and strange to most people, here's a design tool, once you've got it, that allows people to say, well, this is how we could engage in it. But you've also got this thing with young people there who are being bombarded with why didn't you, why didn't you, why didn't you? And also missing. So there's this great, as I said when I was speaking earlier, you know, you've got all of these other opportunities and we're saying they're not taking them. Well, the reason is they don't know about them. So I just said, well, wait a minute, here's a user experience. Why don't we look at the different groups of young people, the personas, and do some sort of comparative work? This is why I said it was a development thing, because it's a new toy. But I want to see how we can then take this user experience thing that has worked so well with web design, with technology design, and say, okay, how can we use it in the sustainable development goal field? And particularly, how can we use it so that young people can take all of these various opportunities and products that we're throwing at them and make it so they want to engage with them? I just like it brings in the psychology and the social research element in that perhaps isn't always there.
Do you have anything that you would like to share, or, you know, because I would, maybe Michelle would like to have something to take away with. Sorry.
One of the greatest barriers I've had from adults is the belief that young people aged 13 to 17, 18 are not capable of participating or involvement in creating their own education experience. And yet every project I've ever done has gone against that. So I think the takeaway from this is be very careful that you don't get sucked in to doing that. And I'll come clean. There are times when I do that myself, even after all this time.
Peter was saying that maybe a smartphone app could help. Would
I have a problem with that, Peter. I have a problem with that. Quite often, people reach for, let's do it on a smartphone. And people have done that, and it's not engaged. I think the trick to the UX thing is that you don't start out by assuming that you need a smartphone app. What you do, you start out by assuming that people want to get involved, but they haven't got there yet. And then they design their own means of involvement. What fascinated me when I tested it a little bit with the plastic-free tuck shop was that I was expecting them all to do that, and some of them wanted to create the app. And then as they went through it and they did it, and they looked at the pathway and the different groups of young people surrounding them wanted to get involved, they realized that they needed an old-fashioned poster. So they got their crayons out and created their own posters, which we reproduced, and that was more effective than an app. I think there's a danger that we just sort of go where we think we should go. I love from the UX approach that you put it in the hands of the user, and you can be quite surprised at what they come up with.
yes, he just think I think it is valid. You know, if you have on the phone, and every people today have a phone, so if the young people can have the phone and play with it, then they can exploit themselves and ask questions.
But they don't always get all of their information from the phone. That's what I've learned.
No, but the thing is also that they can at least trick them to have some questions, and they have your contacts, or you know.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, I'm not saying it's not valid. I just think that part of it is actually putting it into their hands, and
but it is also
might not
also
be
what
the thing we think it is.
It is also what we want, don't we? We want to give them the responsibility. We want them to be adult themselves and taking responsibility of their own life. But you know, it's different view. It is not the place to discuss it. But to go back to Michelle, Michelle appreciated it and she likes your approach. And yeah, it's great. And we also have Joy from Facebook. She was saying that maybe the skills could be taught when children are very young. Her kids went to private school. They started in primary school, and they got the skills, and it had helped them. Furthermore, she said, do you have any, no, let's take this, and I'll take the next question later. So what is your say about teaching young people in very early age?
I'm pro. I'm pro. You need to be slightly different because they have, you have to be aware that young people need to develop their skill sets, develop as they get older and they mature. So there's that qualification to everything I say. But I did a fascinating project on bittern conservation. For those people that don't know, the bittern is a brown bird, a brown wetland bird that is, it needs our help, lives in reed beds. I was working with young people from the age of 8 to 18. We had to adjust the program and the approach for the 8 to 10 and then the 12 to 13-year-olds. But yes, absolutely, we got them involved. They were presenting their projects. They had the skills. The only qualification is that if you've got a 9-year-old, you have to make some allowances because they're still building their confidence and they're still building their skill set. But absolutely, totally agree.
Yes, and she has another question. Do you have any downloads that she can use, because she's a mentor herself and she gets new students every year, so it would be nice to have some fact sheets or something that you can share?
Put us in touch. I don't have them as downloads at the moment because I keep them updated, but if she wants them, put me in touch, I'll send them over.
Okay, I'll get in touch with her. So go back to your presentation 20 minutes ago, where you were talking about database.
Yeah.
What did you refer to? Database of what? Opportunities.
Opportunities. It goes back to this thing. We keep there are so many opportunities for young people that they don't know about. We're constantly trying to get them involved in things and they don't know about it. So all I did was take some of the pain away for them, which was to look locally what was happening in Cambridge and say, right, you can contact this person, you can contact this. Then I started reaching out to people I knew, like the IUCN, and sort of saying, well, what's going on, guys? What are you involved with? Or what are your members involved with? Where can I push them to? So that I created maybe database is a grand word for it. The kids called it a database. But it was essentially, here are contacts, here is how you contact, these are the opportunities that you can look at to get support. In the context of the plastic-free tuck shop, they looked through all of that. They took the information about, well, all the initiatives about how to reduce plastic and put them into a practical context, and discovered it didn't work. That was the thing. It was this dawning realization that if they're running a tuck shop and they need to put sweets in there, they couldn't just get rid of plastic overnight. They had to work out ways of doing it. So the database then became useful because there were opportunities for them to get basic hygiene certificates, which we'll put them through in September because exams got in the way, their exams got in the way. So we'll do it in September, so that they are now working with one of the parents they found out is a confectioner, although she's not a confectioner anymore, she's got a different job. They're going to bring it all together and they're going to start making their own confection, their own sweets, their own candy, so that they don't have to keep buying things in that are wrapped in plastic. They found out that there are all these little societies and all these big institutes that offer free materials, free download materials. So they're looking at that to work out how they can create their own plastic-free packaging for the sweets they're making. So it's a database of the opportunities and the resources. And then as we develop the project, we let them interrogate and work it in the way they want it.
Wow, it's impressive.
No, it's obvious, really.
So the database, because for me, when I'm talking about database, I'm thinking of computing. Is it so it is just your contacts, your network you're talking about?
And partly the ones they build up as well. I encourage them, and well, actually, I encourage them through the youth leader to write to people. So if they find out that somebody is interested in reducing plastics, write to them, find out what they can tell you. And that comes back to the soft skills thing as well, because all of a sudden they're having to write and ask for something, but not in they're not texting their mate, you know, next door. They're having to write to, I don't know, should we say somebody like Francis, for argument's sake, and request information from him. So again, it's a good way of developing, but there's a motivation for them to do it properly because it helps their project.
So just to make it very clear for myself, it is not a computing database, it is a brain network.
Yes, you could call
yeah.
it that. I'm always worried about semantics. I mean, somebody actually described it as a card index once.
Yes.
It's
So,
database, card index, brain. It's wherever you can bring those things together.
Mm.
What I do like is they tend to put them onto spreadsheets, because anything they put on a spreadsheet seems to go on a spreadsheet. It gives them a bit of comfort. There's always a couple of them that are not happy doing face-to-face stuff, but because it's team building, they will go for computerizing anything. But it also allows me to encourage them to think about record keeping. So when did you who did you contact? When did you contact them? So all that information, that background stuff, they start getting introduced to.
Okay, so you build kind of software for them to put in their contacts, to put in
No,
their
they do
data.
that for themselves. They do
Oh,
that
they make it themselves. Okay, they make themselves.
their own knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's fun to work with. They find strange programs to do this with. They send it to me, or they send it to the youth worker they're working with, and we can't access it or open it because it's not a common piece of software they've used. So again, it's a great way of learning about communication. across the entire board?
Yeah, I'm just trying to have an idea of what kind of information you have so we can share with Joy, because she thinks this is a cool, very good topic to talk about, and her community in Enfield would
Yeah.
benefit from it. And she would like to have some downloads or some fact sheets. That's what we're thinking of.
But you can probably gather from the process I've just said, that's an ongoing, constantly updating thing. But
yeah,
that's why it's difficult to have it as a download. The other thing is that I had not mentioned this. I've assumed people would do this automatically, which is wrong of me, actually. I do tend to try and keep everything separate to each project because I'm working with young people, so I like them to keep all of their information and everything isolated, as it were, not in a public domain, for what I hope are obvious reasons.
yes. So I have another question. The pilot, it was the plastic thing, it was successful. The real impact of it, can you mention a few impacts of it in our community? Yeah, the green thing, but you know.
Okay. The first impact that comes to mind was watching 3 young people go from being very nervous, being very confident, and confident enough to present to their parish council, which for them was figures of authority. But they got up and they're prepared to do it. The other major impact, okay, we've talked about all the skilling levels. It's watching adults' perceptions change, because these young people went from being, well, don't they just hang about and they only turn up to youth clubs so they can smoke? It's not true at all. To actually seeing them as valued members of the local community, of taking the lead and engaging young people in conversations about, well, how could we do this at home? What else could we be doing? How can we support you? So you create that intergenerational dialogue, and you see the value, not just the confidence of young people, but the value and all those barriers that people sometimes put up start to disappear. I also like the fact, I suppose it's because I'm a dad myself, I like the fact that all of a sudden parental figures had a value other than parents. They were working as a group, trying to work out how do you sell things. They couldn't quite work out when they'd done a prototype of chocolate fudge, why they couldn't get it to sell. And that's when one of them realized their dad worked as a salesman. So they went off and talked to him, and all of a sudden he was a guy that knew stuff. They were desperately trying to work out how to make things in a way that allowed them to make it one week but sell it the next. And that's when they discovered that that one of the parents, confectioner. Oh, I forgot to mention another one was a I always say this incorrectly. Chocolatier. Somebody that works with chocolate, right? All of a sudden, those parents were no longer parents. Those parental figures were no longer those adults that, you know, sort stuff out for you. They actually had a different value. And again, I saw that dialogue and that confidence develop. I noticed this morning that on the news over here that there were all that news about the increase in knife crime. And it also led, as always, into this idea about how do you have what used to be called community cohesion. If you've got these small informal groups that are working on projects of value, you actually begin to create those dialogues, create that understanding. I did a project a couple of years ago where we established a youth parish council. And I was amazed to see that some of the young people that had been labelled as troublemakers when they came forward, actually because they got involved and they were spearheading things to do with bus transport and so on, actually developed a value. And that impact can't be measured because it's very qualitative. It can't be predictive because you're working with individuals, and some of them will and some of them won't. I mean, it's not 100% effective every time. but you can create this engagement. And I think, thinking about the previous question, another takeaway, please, let's get this informal youth club approach to education acknowledged, reinforced, and properly resourced in some way. Because a lot of these successful projects were not done through the formal education system, they were done through very informal groups, spontaneous groups that were working through the youth sector.
I'm very touched about the parents could show other values than being parents.
Yes, it happens.
Yeah, you know, it is being parent yourself. It's quite nice to show that you are other than just parent.
Well, you do realize that when I'm saying that, they're talking about other people's parents, not their own.
No, yeah. Also, no, but I also think that also their own parents, they also see their parents as a salesman, not just dad or mom.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, and he is good at selling, not just that he's good at telling me what to do, but he also good at selling to other people. Yeah. I would appreciate it if my son could see the other side of me, but you know. I think that we have 2 minutes to the hour. I don't see any question. I have a lot of questions for you, but we don't have time. Just the last question for you. What is your vision? Where do you want this to go?
I would like to see this done, first of all, on a UK basis, and then I would like to really build on the collaboration with the US to see how we can take it onto a more international platform. The UNEP Youth Award, which ended up being sponsored by Volvo as the Volvo Adventure, started off in a similar way, a small pilot. We took across the UK, we collaborated with some other countries, and the next thing you know, the UN has endorsed it and it's gone international. I would love to see us doing that and creating the scenario where young people are actively working in their local communities to create sustainable development goal projects that link to the whole green economy, green business, greener community. And personally, if I could see that happen within the next 5 years, I'd be more than happy.
5 years is very impressive. This is I'm watching you.
It can be done. It can be done.
Yes. Thanks a lot to Joy from Facebook, and thank Peter, Patricia, Michelle, Anna to join us with very interactive conversation discussion we have here. And Wayne, it's really interesting, and I would like to help you where I can to get it where you want to go in the next 5 years.